I'm guessing the reason you clicked on this video is because you want to improve in Call of Duty. Most specifically, you want to figure out how the hell you can stop yourself from dying. This will allow you to start creating longer kill streaks and earning those higher rewards for those long kill streaks, such as the advanced UAV, and maybe, just maybe, even achieving the ultimate goal of multiplayer Call of Duty, the tactical nuke. It's something we're going to discuss in great detail today. And before we get started, I just want to note that while we're going to be using Modern Warfare 19 clips, as you see in the background right now, these tips and tricks apply to literally every single COD game, no matter the input, no matter the platform, it's all the same. And this isn't going to be one of those like, oh, you should just improve your accuracy. Oh, you should get better movement. That's not what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about things that every single player of every single skill level can do right now in their gameplays to better their own performance. And that subject is knowing where the enemy players are. Knowing where these players are that are on the enemy team is one of the most fundamental ways you can stop yourself from dying in any Call of Duty. So my goal for this video is going to be pass on as much of my knowledge that I've accrued over years of COD and thousands of long kill streaks about enemy locations, spawns, and movement routes and patterns. And we're going to try to do all of this in under 12 minutes. So let's begin. Now, this is a really loaded subject. So I'm going to try to break this down into 5 simple categories that you guys can focus on to try to improve your gameplay as fast as possible. However, if you want to take one major thing away from this video, it should be this. If you're running through the map, you should be trying to continuously update like an image in your mind, almost like snapshot grenades when you throw them into a house and you see all the enemies light up. You should be trying to predict how many enemies are in any given corner of the map all around you in all different angles and 360 degrees of area. So basically, say you're on a map and you're going into a house, you should try to think, okay, how many enemies am I expecting to encounter on the bottom floor? How many are on the top floor? How many might be on the street to the side? How many might be in one of their spawns? This is something you want to have a general sense of, and this is more of like an intuition, that a feel for it that you gain with more experience when you're starting to integrate the 5 categories of information that I'm going to talk about in this video. So the first of the 5 categories is about physical information given to you by the game. This is stuff that you can always be integrated and updating into your model of the world as you go around and clear houses and make sure you're keeping track of where people are around you. The UAV and advanced UAV is an absolutely fantastic way to do this. If you're a player that's just trying to stay alive longer, you should absolutely be running UAV. It's a very cheap kill streak. It just is so helpful. Most people don't have Ghost on, so you're just able to have so much more information about the physical whereabouts of those players, and it's something you definitely need to be running if you find yourself not knowing where people are that often. Furthermore, the UAV is going to teach you a lot about movement patterns that if you're not like a sort of a new COD player and you don't necessarily know exactly where all the movement patterns of individuals are, the UAV is going to show you just roughly kind of how enemies move through the map, and that's going to significantly increase your understanding of where those enemies might be when you don't have a UAV up. However, one of the pieces of information that is so undervalued in my opinion is the kill feed. Now let me explain to you what I mean by this. Basically, say you're running through an area, right, and you see somebody off in the distance. You know what skin they have because you've seen them the rest of the game. You know that player is like, you know, TTV Noisy or something like that. Some weird, you know, sweaty name. You see him off in the distance, and then he kind of peeks back behind the corner, and you're not sure if he's still there or not. But then you look out in the kill feed, and you see that one of your teammates has actually just killed TTV Noisy. Well, now you know that that entire area is clear because the guy that was just there is no longer occupying it because he's dead. That's just a very micro example, but if you're doing this on a macro scale for the whole game all the time, you're having a rough understanding of how many enemies are in your immediate vicinity and how many enemies might be getting killed around you. Furthermore, you're going to know how many enemies you're going to expect to appear in the next spawn based on how much death you see in the kill feed, like relative death between your team and their team. If it's all your team killing their team, then you can imagine that the next wave of spawns is going to have a lot of people in it. A similar concept of this is just sounds and gunshots around you, and you got to keep in track the ones in the distance too. If you hear a lot of fighting off in the distance, you might have a little bit of a clearer path in that situation to sort of flank around the side and then get a better shot on their spawn because there's just so much chaos going on in a very specific area that allows you to give yourself more space around the sides of the map. And this moves into the next concept, which is probably one of the most important things you can do when you're just having like more experience in the game, and that's memorizing and understanding how spawns work in all Call of Duty games. So spawns are a little bit different based on if you're playing a kill-based game mode or an objective-based game mode. I find that it's much easier to know where enemies are in objective-based game modes because of the way the spawns rotate depending on where the objective is. For example, Domination, which is the most mild version of this, shows that enemies typically don't spawn near opposing teams' flags unless their spawn, the flag that they currently own, has been completely overrun with enemies. You really need to kind of push your entire team into the enemy spawn in order to get them to flip out if you don't currently own that flag. In Hardpoint and Headquarters, mind you, this is so different. The spawns are rotating literally all the time, regardless of where your friendly team is. It is much easier to flip a spawn in hardpoint because all you really have to do is send like one of your friendly players in there, and then it will send the enemy team to a new alt spawn point on the other part of the map that gives them another access into the hardpoint or the headquarters. And additionally, wherever that headquarters is changes both team spawns on the entire map. So if you can memorize where those spawns are based on where each hardpoint is, which is a very consistent, concrete thing that you will notice if you play a lot of hardpoint, then you have a massive advantage and a way better way of knowing roughly where enemies are. This is something you develop with just time on game and just studying, watching people play, watching your VODs back, and just generally putting a lot of time into COD games, but it's the same across every single game. For example, you could put a schematic map up of the hardpoints of all the maps in the game. You could show me, all right, this is, Soldo Harbor, this is where the hardpoint is, and I'd be like, okay, boom, 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 boom. These are your 4 spawn points. It's very, very rare for teams to spawn anywhere except these 4 points right here. And I can pretty much do that for every single hardpoint in the game. Now just think about how much of a massive advantage I have over that. I have slightly good accuracy, I'm okay in movement, and I know where people are all the time. It's pretty hard for me to get killed when I'm just operating on that level of knowledge, and that allows me to put together those higher streaks. And then a tip that a lot of people don't really understand when they're talking about spawns and trying to figure out where the enemies are is the fact that if you push into the spawn too hard, you're going to flip them out, and then you're going to have less of an idea of where they're going to spawn next. Even if you do have the spawns memorized and you sort of have a strong understanding of where they should spawn next, it's not guaranteed. So you'd rather just keep them in the spawn that you know they're currently at by hanging back a little bit, just enough to not flip them all out. And one little key trick to those headquarters and hardpoint players out there is that the spawns will rotate actually slightly before the objective moves. So if you're within the last 10 seconds of a hardpoint or a headquarters, those spawns are actually going to move. It's kind of less common with headquarters because usually somebody actually captures the headquarters before the neutral territory runs out. So usually people do end up capturing a given headquarters. But the hardpoint, however, this happens every single hardpoint. With 10 seconds left on the timer of that hardpoint, you need to anticipate the spawns moving, which is a little bit out of tune, and it actually is rotating to the next hardpoint's spawn point. So wherever that next hardpoint is, you need to know the spawn points for that hardpoint, and that's where those enemies are going to be, even though the hardpoint hasn't yet moved. This was into the third thing I want to talk about, and that's understanding how your enemies actually play. Now, this is a very micro example. It's specific to each individual game, but if you can figure this out early on in the game, you have a much higher chance of putting together a long streak and potentially even a tactical nuke if you can sort of understand the play styles of the enemies you're actually going against in that specific game and how that enemy typically plays. So for example, if we see a Riot Shield kid, if I see a Riot Shield kid who's just running at the hardpoint constantly, then I know that I can actually kind of farm this kid a little bit because he just doesn't have that much of an interest in coming and killing me or anyone else on our team for that matter. His main goal, no matter how many times he dies, is to secure the hardpoint for as long as possible. So if you know where those routes are to get to the hardpoint, the fastest and quickest routes to get there, you can assume that he is going to be spending a large amount of time on those routes, not paying much attention to flanking routes where he can get more kills. Similarly, if there's a guy on the other team that has no interest in the hardpoint whatsoever and is always sort of camping and just sort of staying around the edges of the map and trying to flank as much as possible so he doesn't have to get into a lot of gunfights because he's trying to get kills, then you know that you need to be a little bit more cautious and try to predict that he's going to be in those situations as you move through them. So for example, if you have maybe 2 or 3 of these guys on the other team, you need to be a lot more cautious in your play and assume when you're making these 3D renders of the map that you're going to encounter these players in kind of weird locations and try to take that into account so that you can center your gun on places that they might have been in the past. For example, if someone's always camping in the same building or they're always using the same sort of flanking route, every time you go to that part of the map, you need to be ready to shoot them in the face. The fourth thing that I really think is very important that people don't really do a lot is use lethal kill streaks. Now, I get it. Having specialists is really OP, and I do become a lot more difficult to kill when I have specialists, but in general, I also lose a significant understanding of where players are on the map. For example, if I am on a nuke streak, I like to run VTOL, support helo, and advanced UAV in Modern Warfare, or any equivalent in any other game. And the reason I run those lethal kill streaks is basically to help me funnel players back into their spawns. So we just kind of finished talking about knowing where spawns are. What's really helpful is having streaks in the air to funnel those players back into those spawns, basically pick off stragglers on the side of the maps and bring them all back to the center spawns, which you theoretically should be memorized by now. So then you can just go around and shoot people as they come out of those spawns right after your support helo or your VTOL just killed them. Essentially, you get to spend less time moving around the map looking for players and more times just taking enemies and funneling them out and picking them off in sort of a spawn trapping bottleneck fashion because your kill streaks are doing the hard work, the heavy lifting, lifting for you. The main downfall to these kill streaks is that you lose some audio because they're super freaking loud, and sometimes they will take your kills. But in general, in my experience, I find it much easier, and I find the benefit of these kill streaks far outweighs the problems that are associated with them. And the fifth and final point, guys, is very straightforward. This happens to the absolute best of players, happens to me all the time. I lose track of where people are. The render in my head is not sufficient. I have really no idea where other players are. I'm not able to piece together all the pieces of information that have been given to me into a cohesive understanding of where players are. The key thing that you want to do in the situation is just take a breath. Take a second, pause, try to really assess the situation. Maybe wait out an entire hardpoint or headquarters, or wait for a couple of flags and domination to flip so that you can look at the kill feed and start understanding who's killing who, where should you expect the spawns to be, and just give a little bit more context to the situation that you're currently in. Furthermore, if you kind of stay in one area, maybe camp a little bit and just chill in a corner for a second, you'll probably get a lot of audio cues that are going to help you figure this out as well. It doesn't make you a rat player, it doesn't make you a camper. It just means that while you were out pushing the crap out of people, you basically wiped everybody out of their spawn, and then you decided, oh, damn, I pushed a little bit too hard. Now I just need to take a second and re-engage and figure out where everybody is. I do very much hope you guys learned something from this video. I did try to put on as much of my knowledge as I possibly could in such a short period of time. If you have any questions about anything further or about any of the concepts I talked about in this video, definitely don't hesitate to put a comment down below. I respond to every single comment and would absolutely love to engage with you guys and see what you have to think, and see if you guys have any tips that I failed to mention in this video about knowing where enemies are on the map and how that can help you die less in Call of Duty games. If you did find some of these tips useful, I would greatly appreciate if you consider leaving a like on the video. It definitely helps me out, helps the algorithm out, and helps my channel grow. And if you're not already subbed over here, definitely consider subbing to the channel. We come up with tactic nuke gameplays, tutorials, and just all sorts of Call of Duty content every other day over here, and we'd absolutely love to have you as part of the channel. But that is gonna be all for me today, guys. I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your day. For now, I'm out of here. Peace.